All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Agars, and I'm the director of the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations here at Cal State San Bernardino. We serve children, parents, and families in the inland region through research, education, and direct services. I am really thrilled to be joining you today to kick off the second year of the ICDFR webinar series, which has been, we're just thrilled. It's been a great success. It's been a wonderful way for us to build connections and relationships between the university and our institute with so many folks and families just like you in the inland region and beyond. And so we're excited to be back for another year. And I'm really grateful to you that you are here. We have an amazing series set up for the new year with some smart and talented presenters, just like our folks today. I know you're going to really enjoy it. So I hope you stay with us all year long. So welcome. And with that, I'll turn things over to Rachel Cook, who will be our facilitator for today's panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agars. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Cook, and I am a researcher at the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations here at Cal State San Bernardino. And as we all know, the past 1.5 years have been especially challenging for children and families. This webinar will bring together a panel of experts in the areas of school-aged children, parenting, work-family balance, relationships, and counseling to answer your questions about navigating the year ahead. As I introduce each of our experts, feel free to think of questions you would like to ask them and send them to me in the chat. It's my pleasure to introduce CSUSB Psychology and Child Development faculty members, Dr. Kelly Campbell, Dr. Laura Kamptner, Dr. Eugene Wong, Dr. David Chavez, and Dr. Mark Agars. Kelly Campbell is an expert in couple relationships and friendships. Her research examines couple relationships and friendships, including deceptive online romance known as catfishing, infidelity, instant connections, and love. Laura Kamptner teaches courses in child and human development, child guidance, parenting, and the history of childhood, and works with several community parent education projects, which include the local jail system. Her research interests focus on the impact of early parenting quality on later outcomes, especially mental health. David Chavez teaches a variety of graduate courses in clinical and counseling psychology, including a course on family therapy. David is the current director of the Clinical and Counseling Psychology graduate program, leading to marriage and family licensure, and runs a parent support group for the parents of LGBTQ+ children. Eugene Wong is a child development faculty at CSUSB and licensed psychologist in the state of California. He works with K-12 students in San Bernardino County and has extensive experience in child clinical assessment. Mark Agars is the director of the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at CSUSB. His primary research interests focus on the work-life balance, the work-life interface, with an emphasis on how work demands impact individual and family health and well-being. So with that, please join me in welcoming our panelists. All right, so for everyone to go ahead and get started, we'll ask kind of something that can apply to whoever wants to jump in and answer. So in your opinion, our panel of experts, what are some of the biggest challenges that are facing children and youth and families today in this ongoing age of COVID, and what can you do about them?
Well, I'll jump in here. One of the things that we're hearing from so many different sources today are how children are stressed, they're depressed, many are behind in school, many are missing their peers and these kinds of things. And the thought of entering another year of this is rather numbing for so many of us. Some of the things that I share with the families that we work with are the importance of talking to children about what's going on and reassuring them that you are, as a parent, trying to keep them as safe as possible. Also trying to find out what kinds of things that they're very anxious about or worried about. We also know that getting outdoors and exercise helps in terms of de-stressing children. Families planning fun things to do outside because particularly with all of us being stressed out at home, one of the things that helps is to get outside in the environment and increase the number of positive interactions that that people have. And from the time that this started, I also keep reminding parents that the more children understand about what's going on, the less anxious they will be. And I raised a son that is very much into science, and I think this is a great opportunity to get kids excited about understanding what viruses are, and it's a good science as well as history lesson, because pandemics have been happening since the beginning of recorded history. So one of my messages is that parents talk to their children about what their concerns are, plus helping them to understand in kid language what's going on.
And I think to piggyback a little bit on what Laura just spoke to, for me in particular, because I work with students with learning differences, so that can include the range of emotional disturbances, learning disorders, spectrum disorders, etc. For that particular group of students, I think there are additional challenges to sort of re-entering the school experience in some form. So likewise, for any of you that may be working with those students or have a child of your own who experiences a learning difference, whatever questions you may have, please let us know, and we'll try to address that for you.
I feel like my colleagues have done a great job of talking about some of these issues. It strikes me that, one, I just want to reemphasize that it's really important to have these conversations with our kids and let them know what's going on, do it in a developmentally appropriate, kid work at their level, but also I think it means that we as parents need to be somewhat centered and well-informed as well, that in order to have those conversations, rather than, and recognizing, again, just supporting, keeping children safe, doing everything we can to keep everyone in the family safe, without the strong reactions that can happen, that feed into children's anxiety. I think that when we're reactive, our children are reactive.
And one of the other, if I can just add one more thing, one of the other big concerns that families have today is how to help children who may be falling behind in school. We've discovered over the last year that online learning isn't cool from kindergarten through college. And there have been reports out about how many children are just sort of zoomed out and not engaged and just really done with all of that. But then with so many kids starting back at school, we've noticed particularly in language and in math, a lot of children are behind. And one of the things that parents can do is to first talk to the teacher about where the child is in terms of having difficulty. And then going and get you can go to Barnes & Noble, or there are great teacher supply stores throughout the Inland Empire to get other workbooks and other fun activities that can help bring a child up to speed. And working with a child one-on-one at home will be very helpful in terms of bringing them back to where they should be. And another really good resource is to, if you don't have the time or maybe the expertise, is to hire a college student or a high school student to provide tutoring experience. But that one-on-one time can be very, very helpful for kids.
And many people in the community may not be aware. There are professionals in the community, and certainly in the Inland Empire, throughout Southern California, who are called educational therapists. These are individuals that are specifically trained to work with students outside of the school setting who may need additional support. So students may be receiving accommodations in school. They may not be, depending upon the diagnosis and so on. But educational therapists typically have the training to work with a range of learning-related challenges, difficulties. It's always in a one-on-one setting, and the frequency of the work will sort of depend upon the particular situation. So for those of you who might not be aware of the existence of educational therapists, look that up or reach out to me, and we can certainly try to get you connected to individuals or professionals like that.
Rachel, if I could, I wanted to add, one thing too about the impact of some of the work changes on children as well, because a lot of folks, adapted new work arrangements, obviously, and also their children were home from school over the past year and a half or so, and now that's changing, right? And so we had sort of established these norms and these points of contact, time at home where we were around more, and now as we get called back into more being away, more being at work, and kids being back at school, that some of those norms and the routines that had developed and the opportunities for quality time with children have been kind of removed, right? And they're just not the same. And I think a lot of times when we think about the work, changes in our work arrangements, we think about it from the individual's perspective and the worker, and how are they managing their time and their load and their responsibilities. But I think, I'm not the child development expert clearly in this room, but I do think those work-related changes are really important to be aware of, and recognizing that there is some loss being experienced by children who had that time and those routines with their parents or adults in their lives that they don't necessarily have anymore. And so being aware of those, I think, is really important.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for that really great kind of introduction to all of these important topics that we're all kind of wondering about. And there's a lot of different questions I want to ask each one of you based on what you said. But I think I'll start with some of the messages that you all were sharing was about the importance of talking to our children about the stresses of what's going on, kind of trying to explain what a virus is and how to stay safe and how to handle the changes and disruptions in our routine and what's going on, and the possibility of going back to school and then needing to come back home to quarantine, or the possibility of going into another lockdown, or any of these changes and challenges that are going on in the environment. And so a couple of you mentioned that you need to talk about them in developmentally appropriate ways, and so in kid-friendly ways. So can you give some examples of kind of different ages, how we might talk to a 3 or 4-year-old about what's going on that's kind of just entering preschool, or someone that's in elementary school or high school, trying to kind of understand the differences and how to talk to our children about these things and keep them as centered and grounded and least anxious as possible.
Very young children have a very simple and concrete view of the world. And obviously our explanations to them will be very simple. And we would couch things in terms of keeping our bodies safe. And I would use the example of when you catch a cold or when you catch a flu, but something that they can relate to. And Amanda can probably jump in here too. The other thing that I discovered early on in this pandemic is that there are some terrific kids' books out for different ages of children, including teens, about COVID, about what it is. And they're great books to read aloud to preschool age children versus elementary age, and even to adolescents. So I have a list of those somewhere, and I can post those again. School age children would have a broader understanding of how the world works and a beginning understanding of basic biology, I would guess, but parents could use more sophisticated language in talking to them. And there's a great science website called Brain Pop, which I looked up at the beginning of the pandemic, and that has cute little cartoons that explain just about every concept that a child could possibly be interested in kid-friendly language. But it's a wonderful website. And obviously, adolescents would have a more adult-like understanding of what's going on. So if parents don't have the words to use, we can repost some materials, because I wrote some stuff for the Institute about how to talk to children about this. And not only about what COVID is, but how they're feeling and what they're nervous about and anxious about. Because when we don't give children accurate language that's digestible for their age level, then they kind of make stuff up. And that can lead to more fears and anxieties. So keeping the lines of communication open, not only about COVID, but also about how they're feeling and what they're anxious about is important.
And I tend to find concrete examples, especially for school-age children on up, is a great way to sort of reach them in terms of understanding what's happening with COVID as a viral infection, how things may be happening in terms of individuals being infected in various settings and so on. So something that a couple of teachers and I have done with various grade levels is that we've used miniature balloons that we fill with helium. And then we use the little Nerf, I'm not even sure what they call it, the Nerf ammunition, the little guns that children play with, that have the foam tip, but the rubber suction end. And we attach those to the balloons. And then we show the kids how with greater release of balloons, there's more viruses in the air, how it moves about through the classroom and so on and so forth. And for a lot of students, that's something that helps them to really understand sort of the mechanism of how the viral particles are moving in the air, how to keep ourselves safe with masks on and such. So I like using those kinds of concrete examples because students can actually relate to it. They can sort of see how things are moving in the air as the balloons are floating around and so on.
I just posted something on the CDC, kind of an activity book, coloring book for kids. I apologize, I didn't look carefully enough to figure out the ages. It seems some things are simpler and then others require reading, et cetera. But something to work through with a younger child, which would permit them possibly to both get somewhat informed about COVID-19 and maybe take some, feel like you have some control. Obviously we don't have complete control over COVID-19, but to feel like the things to do to start to color your own mask or things like that, just to start to feel a little bit more in charge of those sorts of things for younger kids. Again, there are other things that would be very useful, but it just seemed a nice way of starting to address some of those issues that they may lack clarity about, but also that talking about might stave off some of the potential mental health consequences of kind of being quarantined, et cetera.
So I think a couple of you, thank you for those responses. I think that was great ideas for how to talk about kind of what COVID is and how we need to keep ourselves safe and how to talk to different ages of kids about that. You also have mentioned the importance of talking about like their feelings or insecurities or anxieties that might be going on and how to recognize those and identify what maybe the source or the cause of that is. I'm wondering, it's a lot of times difficult for us as adults to really identify those things in ourselves, what might be causing us stress or how to nail it down and how to manage it. So how do we, so this is kind of go to all of you. How do we talk to our children about like, what are some specific questions or words or things to use when we're talking to our children about their feelings and anxieties and how to manage them? And then also, how do we talk, how do we deal with figuring that out for ourselves and for maybe our partners as well?
When I'm in the school settings, because students can't, like you say, Rachel, can't necessarily self-identify those things, I usually try to go in with sort of a laundry list of possibilities. And as we start sort of looking at those possibilities, it brings to mind for a lot of the students, oh, it's this. It's not quite that you're talking about, but it's this thing, and so on and so forth. Or we'll post possibilities up on like a word wall type of setup where students can literally either put a sticker on a possibility or pull a card off of a wall in a very concrete way and say, this might be what's causing me to feel a certain way, as a way to help them to identify what might be the cause of their worry or their anxiety and such.
I think just to piggyback on what you're saying, Eugene, parents and other adults who work with children can also take cues from what a child is saying, how the day went, or how they're behaving, and reflect back to them, you seem worried about this. Or you can ask kids more directly. You can bring up the conversation of COVID or what went on at school today, and tell me what you're worried about. I'm real big on encouraging children to talk about their feelings from the day they're born. But for some kids, it may be more of a challenge. But just asking them what they're feeling, what are they worried about at school or their friends, can help to open up that conversation.
I was going to say, and I think segueing off what Laura just said, not only do children struggle with this, but I think we as adults often struggle identifying our emotions and talking about our feelings. And so I agree that, starting the day they're born and to think about, obviously I think we're all concerned about COVID-19 and, people may be here because this is the issue. This is a crisis of the moment, but this is good training for the rest of our lives as well. To start, this is as good a time as any to start to talk a little bit more about what we're feeling, what our children might be feeling, learning to put not only the reasons for why we're feeling what we're feeling, but perhaps even more basic is what are we feeling? Feeling happy, feeling sad. I like the idea of making it concrete, and there are ways you can. There are emotion flyers and emotion boards, basically where kids can start to look at simple. Emojis or things along those lines that demonstrate different sorts of feelings that people might be having, and then being able to put words to those things. I like the idea of kind of open-endedly just asking, how the day go today, and tell me more about what happened, and listening for the anxieties and distress, and listening for the possible reasons for those sorts of things. Again, because I think it's important, we can truly, and trust me, I've managed to imprint my kind of concerns and anxieties onto my own children who are now grown. So just recognizing that we have to be able to have those conversations within ourselves, with our partners, with the important people in our lives, and most importantly with our children, I think, or perhaps importantly with our children. Finally, and there might be a better time for this, but I think look for those behavior changes. Those can be kind of signs of distress, signs of like there's something else going on. So when your son or daughter, your child has been kind of a certain sort of child, and all of a sudden things change, that indicator that there's a concern there. Look for changes in kind of behaviors of eating, sleeping, things along those lines, acting out at school when that wasn't an issue, or struggling in school when that wasn't an issue. Obviously, COVID-19 has impacted a lot of kids' academic performance, but also, just looking, is there something going on right this moment? Might be good ways of starting to recognize there might be a larger concern here that is spurred on by the COVID-19 situation.
Another good way to get kids to open up is to engage in an activity with them. Say you're cooking in the kitchen together, but when the focus isn't on tell me how you feel with the child sitting across from you, kids are more likely to open up, especially when you're outside of the house. So getting out in nature again, going for a hike in the mountains, going for a walk, but doing something else is a good way to get kids to open up, especially older children and teenagers. Getting in the car is a good thing with teens. So
I was going to say that during this time of heightened stress, partners also could be taking out their frustrations on each other, and it's important not to do that and to recognize when it's happening, because they're also setting the tone and the context for the family. And then, when there's frustrations, anger, anxiety, that spreads throughout everybody. So it's important to recognize when that's happening and to take some deep breaths and not do that to one another, but also to provide some space for laughing. Laughing is like, it just resets things and it really helps. So whatever it takes, whether it's, if you have great humor amongst yourselves, then great. But if not, use some prompts. For me, there's a great show, Impractical Jokers. Anytime it's on, we laugh. And then you don't have to keep it on the whole time, but just get the laugh out, and it kind of resets things. So I want to, it shouldn't be understated. There's a lot of power in laughter. So use it, especially during these stressful times.
Thank you all for those suggestions. I am wondering, everything is so busy and it seems so chaotic, and there's a lot of moving pieces going on with changes in school routines and changes in work schedules and partners and children and everything just kind of going everywhere at once. And so how are we able to, have these important conversations and make quality time with our children or with our partners, or to have these important conversations or have like positive, fun, laughing time? How can we build that into, such a stressful, chaotic, hectic kind of schedule? How do we find time in the day to do that?
We could extend the day by a lot of hours. I think that's one possibility. I think, I think that's a challenge. And I was thinking back to, when Mark was talking about the fact that we had this time with our children, and now we're back to our busy lives that are probably infinitely more busy. I think we need to just kind of prioritize this piece that gave us a time to reset with our kids, with our partners, with our loved ones, because a lot of things changed during this kind of lockdown period. As we start to redevelop, I think we need to keep those positive things that changed. So finding time to be with the kids and to do the fun activities on the weekend and on the daily basis, looking for those opportunities over the course of the day. I mean, kind of just as we're doing things, as we're driving to, drop kids off or et cetera, taking those opportunities to be with and to begin the conversation that permits you to have those more difficult conversations down the road.
I think we've all lived in such a digital world for the last year, maybe trying to consider unplugging ourselves and having our kids unplug and just having real face-to-face contact.
I think Laura is so correct in terms of the car. The car is a great place to have that contact, have that conversation. So for many of the parents that I work with, rather than doing what traditionally has been the case of going to school, picking up their children and so on, going straight home and then trying to transition to a homework kind of situation. For many of the parents that we work with, we've suggested making that ride home a longer ride, so to speak. Stop somewhere for frozen yogurt or a snack or something where there can be sort of an organic conversation that happens before sort of transitioning back to doing the school thing that needs to be completed in terms of homework. But even for partners, likewise, find a time when you can just get in the car and go do something that is totally fun, but it allows for conversations to happen.
Yeah, and I think, being able to do these things, whether it's with your children or with partners, it's about managing boundaries in large part. And I know, one of the going through the lockdown and the work-based changes that so many people faced during COVID, where they had to create workspace at home, right? Or where home became a place of work, not just informally when I had more to do, but actually, setting a place up and home is where I do work. And, to do that successfully before, meaning in the earlier days of COVID meant, both physical and psychological boundaries, right? Creating space and place that could be separate. And so that when you were away from work, but home, you were home and you had the space and time and sort of psychological freedom to engage with your family in the way that you want to. I think now it's a little bit of a tricky situation where we've created this model where we can now be more effective at home, right? We can now work more effectively at home. We've kind of created that, but as we creep back into our traditional workspace, now we do sort of have this conflict where we're away and we're working, but when we come home, we still have, it's very easy to slip back into work because work is still there, because work's been there for a year or so. And so I think part of the, Rachel, to your point, how do you do that? Part of finding that time is remembering those boundaries and reinforcing those boundaries and keeping them. And if your space is adjusted now where you're primarily back in the workplace and not at home, then really minimizing the extent to which work, opportunities for work and tools for work are present in your home and sort of calling to you, if you will, is a really important step to take. And I do think that it was hard already with just cell phones and easy access to work-related things. But now that so many folks have established ways of working at home, it's even more difficult. So, but managing those boundaries is really important.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a really good discussion of kind of some of these overarching themes that we're all still struggling with, is how to communicate about these things and how to manage our stress and talk to our kids and talk to our families about stuff. I also have kind of some very specific or concrete questions to ask to the group. So one of them, for example, that's a new thing to manage in this new year of being back in person in school instead of being online, is that, in the first couple of weeks of school, even, there's been so many cases where, someone gets test positive and we have to stay, now that child needs to all of a sudden stay home in quarantine for 2 weeks, or they might have come into contact with someone. And so there's a lot more disruption in their schooling. They might have struggled last year and now we're worried they're going to be behind again. So if your child has to miss school for a couple of weeks, or they go back and then there's another couple of weeks, if you have to miss school because of a quarantine, how do you manage the stress of are they going to fall behind? How do we make sure that they're still going to do well when they go back to school? How do we manage what they have to do during that 2 weeks at home? All that kind of stuff. How do we make sure they're doing okay in school?
Again, keeping in touch with the teacher and constant touch and knowing what the children are missing, and trying to provide supplemental materials at home. And if the parent doesn't have, again, the time or energy or the know-how, as Eugene was suggesting, or as I was suggesting, get other people to help out. They have COVID, they're quarantining. But this is a time where we all have to do our best, and it's not going to be perfect.
And one of the benefits of the students returning to in-person classes this year is that there seems to be, and it's not yet a known fact, but it seems to be the case that for those children that do have to quarantine for some amount of time because of exposure, potential exposure, and so on, because we're in the classroom, as much as that child might fall a little bit behind because of the quarantine, children seem to get back up to speed, so to speak, much more quickly when they return to school versus being in a situation where they're just online all the time, where they're much more likely to fall behind, stay behind. So one of the things that's happening, I think, this year as students return to school is, even if there are times when they're out of school for some amount of time and they're trying to do the best they can to stay up with what's going on in the classroom while quarantine, they're likely to catch up a little bit better, a little bit more effectively because they return to the classroom at some point.
Okay, great, thank you. I am also wondering about, so we also had another question that was about not feeling safe in the workplace. So this might have been the case for people, throughout the pandemic. They might have been working in person full time, or maybe they're just, in the last couple of months transitioning back into working in person or feeling unsafe in the work environment. And so how are we able to communicate with our coworkers or our supervisors or anyone else in the workplace or whatever about not feeling safe or feeling anxious or not liking being back in person.
Yeah, well, there clearly there's some stuff that I think, David, you're probably better prepared to talk about than I am. But from the workplace side of things, I think that you hit kind of on a larger issue, which is just I think a lot of people are sort of reevaluating what it means to be working and their commitments to work, and I think one of the good things we might, if we could call it that came out of the experience of COVID was people having a moment to kind of pause and recognize just how much being away and being at work and focusing on work and work-related successes relative to family-related successes had kind of taken so much of priority for so many folks. And so I do think there is some reevaluation of priorities. And I actually think that's a really good thing. I think that for folks who ended up spending more time with their partners or their families because they were not physically at work and are now deciding that I want that to be more a part of my life. And so I one of the things I always talk to folks about when we're talking about sort of evaluating the balance between work and family, or the level of work and family responsibilities, it's sort of like is encouraging them to sort of what are your priorities, like what really is important to you, and look at those relative to your behaviors and your time, right? And when you're making decisions, because we have seen for so long so many parents or partners making decisions to prioritize work commitments or work responsibilities over and over again, even though they might interfere with that birthday party, or I'm missing dinner, or whatever that sort of family event might be. And so, at least to part of your question, Rachel, I think one of the good things that has come out of this is that more people are recognizing that they've kind of missed some of their family priorities that are actually important to them. And they're reevaluating how can they make work differently, work better, so that they can still keep those personal and family priorities, the priorities that they wish they were. So I see more of that, and I encourage more of that as well. I think that's a very healthy approach, and I also think it's a unique time, right? Like the break and the lockdown and what COVID did, it has forced people to confront that, right? It was sort of unexpected and unplanned, and yet it's an opportunity because the alternative to pausing for a moment and thinking about it that way is to simply slip back into old norms. And a year from now, we will look back and we will see, work priorities out of balance relative to family priorities, but that's the normal. And so we're back. And so I really do encourage folks to use this as an opportunity, because it is one.
I have just a couple more questions, and then we'll have to wrap it up so our experts can go teach classes. So one of the things that I'm wondering, and that's kind of unique to this new year of COVID, new school year of COVID, is there's a lot of different environments that we're going into, like different schools or grocery stores or whatever, have differing rules on like mask, like face covering rules or vaccine rules. And so and as we've seen, there's been lots of different individual choices and viewpoints and beliefs on the importance of vaccines and masks and all the kinds of things. So how can we deal with that when it comes into within our family? So if I have a different belief about vaccines or the importance of whether I want my child to get vaccinated and my ex-partner does not want our child to get vaccinated, or I think it's okay if we go to the park and have a picnic with our friends, my partner doesn't think that it's okay. So how do we manage those kinds of differing views and conflict maybe within families about how to manage?
That's a tricky one. I mean, we know from the research that the more similarities you share with a partner, and especially when it comes to values, then the easier your relationship is going to be, the more satisfying and long-lasting it is. So this really seems to be getting to a point of differing values. And so you have to talk through them. You have to have respect for it. I guess the partner who doesn't want to go can opt to stay home while the other one, you're going to have to find some way to negotiate and compromise, just like with anything. But when it comes to values, people are a lot less likely to bend or change them compared to other things. So recognizing that there could be some conflict around that. And, we all want the pandemic to end so we don't even have to deal with the conflict of it. But the conflict is real. There's been a lot of strange things happening within families due to COVID, strains and tensions that we couldn't have anticipated, and recognizing it's coming from this contextual source is helpful, but doesn't necessarily solve it. So use your effective conflict resolution skills, be respectful of each other's beliefs. It's just like with any other clash in values.
That's well said. Excuse me. And so again, providing context, kind of focusing on what's really important and the importance of your relationship is always helpful. Obviously, it's a little bit trickier when, that's your ex. I just wanted to kind of speak to that. There's a reason why perhaps you're not together anymore. And part of that, kind of the differences of opinion are they're part of why you're not together. I think the challenge is that oftentimes people are in a place where they're co-parenting with someone who they don't see eye to eye with. So again, I think it helps just to remember the context that, or to this disagreement about what to do in COVID-19 is probably emblematic of a larger set of disagreements that you often have with your ex-partner who is the co-parent of your child or children. And I think back to that is to work from a place of trying to do what's best, to listen to your ex-partner as someone who obviously is also real and human and has interests and needs as well, and to try and prioritize the fact that what really matters is your child, and not just for you, but that for your partners or your ex-partner as well. And if you can come to that place, I think it's helpful. I think sometimes you may need to find someone to help mediate that a little bit. And so not to be shy about doing that. And again, to be as centered as possible, because it's not always easy, but to be centered and have that honest conversation with your ex-partner about these sorts of issues. This communication with everyone is really critical. And it's something that a lot of us, and again, I'll say myself included, could really use more practice with. So hopefully it's not, we're planning for the next pandemic, but we're planning for the rest of our lives. Let's work on these skills right here, right now with the people in our lives.
Thank you, Dr. Chavez. That's an excellent point. I was going to say that to kind of wrap us up that's kind of a theme that has gone on through all of this, is kind of the importance of communicating with everyone in our lives, because of, making sure that we're on the same page, or how to resolve conflicts, or how to, check in about our feelings and our children's feelings, and checking in with our kids' teachers about how they're doing in school, checking in with our supervisors about what they can do to help us be more flexible with managing our family responsibilities. All of these lines of communication are so important for effectively managing all the important, relationships that we have in our lives. And so I really appreciate you all's expertise and your time in coming together today. Do you all have any closing thoughts that you would like our attendees to leave with today, or any final words?
I was just going to add that many of the folks on this panel and other folks, Amanda Wilcox and others in here on campus, have done previous webinars that dug into sort of additional details on some of these things, Rachel, that you're talking about, right? Talking to your kids, setting up, activities and structures and whatnot. And so I just wanted to add for folks who are here today, please go check out our YouTube page, because there's a lot more stuff out there you might get more specifics to address whatever other questions you have.
Yes, absolutely. And that ties into some of the other messages. So I want to thank you all again. My sincere thanks to our speakers today, our expert panelists. And of course, my thanks to all of you for participating in today's webinar hosted by the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at California State University, San Bernardino. At the ICDFR, we've been providing guidance for parents and families based on science and best practice since 2002. To hear more from us, please like and follow us on Facebook and visit our YouTube page where all of our webinars are available. And you can also learn more about our projects by visiting the ICDFR page on the CSUSB website, which is at csusb.edu/ICDFR. So with that, again, my thanks to you all and have a wonderful day and be well.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, everyone.